NASA's official history has always been clean, elegant, and almost perfect. A set of scientific victories arranged in chronological order, each leading to humanity's next great leap. But behind the public list of missions, there was a second list. One that has never appeared in books, documentaries, or presidential speeches. One that was never mentioned to the press, and that, officially, was never planned. This list contained only one name: Apollo 23. The existence of this mission has always been denied. No entry-level employees were aware. No engineer has seen the complete plans. No astronaut talked about it. Those who knew, they quickly learned not to bring up the subject. Not because they were threatened, but because they knew that certain things seen in space should not return home. Certain discoveries should not be shared with a planet still stuck in its own arrogance. The pilot of Apollo 23 was Commander Elias Warden, one of the best astronauts in the program. Trained to operate quietly and disciplined to the point of seeming almost mechanical, Warden was the kind of man the government called when it needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. And most importantly, someone who was not afraid of the unknown. The mission was approved in August 1976, months after the Apollo project was officially terminated. The public believed that NASA had moved away from lunar operations. The truth is that, in the internal secretariat, a new mission was being prepared in absolute secrecy. Not to explore the visible surface of the moon, but the region that never sees the sun, the hidden face, eternally immersed in shadows. The reasons were never recorded in writing, but in the oral testimony of one of the surviving engineers years later, a phrase was repeated countless times. There was something there, before we even knew it existed. Apollo 23 was not launched from Cape Canaveral, but from an auxiliary base in the Pacific. No public broadcast, no countdown, no speech. Instead, the team embarked in absolute silence, as if they were entering a metal tomb about to be sealed. The command module was modified with communication receivers that did not exist in any catalog. Strange equipment, never seen on other missions, was loaded inside. Analysis machines that Elias was not allowed to know what they were for. He just received the order, "You're going to see ruins. Don't touch anything." These words made no sense. Debris on the moon. How could there be ruins in a place where there has never been civilization? The instruction echoed in his mind like a veiled threat. Even so, Warden went ahead. He knew that part of his job was to obey without understanding. But the closer he got to the launch, the more he realized the almost hysterical nervousness of the men involved. It was as if everyone knew they were sending Elijah into something that had no definition. Takeoff took place at 0321 local time. The rocket ascended flawlessly, cutting through the silence of the sea and disappearing into the dark sky. From the outside, he was just one shadow among many. But inside, Warden felt the weight of the completed mission fall on his chest. He was not going to perform science. He wasn't going to make history. I was going to face a secret. During the following days, the module followed its flawless trajectory into lunar orbit. Communication with the base was short and cold. The messages were monitored by American intelligence agents, who filtered out any information considered sensitive. The Warden received only exact coordinates and instructions, nothing more than that. It was on the fourth day of the mission, as it entered the orbit of the hidden face, that something changed. The module passed over a totally dark region. No reflection, no glare, no presence of sunlight. The darkness there didn't seem natural. It looked like a veil, a curtain that someone had put up on purpose. Elias was watching through the side window when he saw something reflect in the metal of the module. Something huge, something that was not part of lunar geography. His heart raced. His training said that this should not be possible, but his eyes confirmed it. It was a structure, an angle, a geometric shadow, a straight line at a site where only jagged craters should exist. He activated the secondary camera, positioned precisely to record visual anomalies. The image appeared on the monitor with light grain. Even so, what was there was impossible to deny. An elevation of colossal proportions, smooth, polished, built. Elias felt his breath flee for a second. The moon had architecture, but before he could understand what he saw, communications broke down. It was not common interference. It was as if the structure itself was emitting a wave capable of silencing human frequencies. The module shook. The panels vibrated. Something was pulling signals from the booth, absorbing them like a magnet absorbs metal dust. When the noise stopped, a whisper, low, fragmented, came from the ship's speakers. It was a human voice, but it seemed distant, ancient, as if it had traveled decades to get there. Elijah froze when he heard the words, "Don't come back here." The voice cut off. After, "They're still inside." The monitor flashed. The image of the structure seemed to approach as if it were moving, but it was made of stone. And at the same time, it was no stone. It wasn't metal. It was no known substance. Warden, for the first time in his entire career, felt true fear. The ruin was not abandoned. The ruin was not empty. Ruin was waiting, and he was getting too close. When Colonel Harris opened the folder marked Apollo 23, he immediately realized that it was not another document forgotten by the space bureaucracy. From the outer cover, the metal seals, and the total absence of official logos, it was already possible to feel that that file had been created, never to be found. It was a dead body buried in silence. The document had no introduction, no history, and no signature. It was composed only of typewritten pages, a mixture of technical reports, audio transcripts, and isolated testimonies of engineers who should never have spoken. Most disturbing was the date on the masthead, November 26, 1974, 2 years after Apollo 17, officially the last manned mission to the moon. But here was, before him, proof that there was another mission. Harris took a deep breath and began to read. The report began by describing an anomaly detected by solar surveillance satellites, a fixed circular shadow on the far side of the moon, which appeared during an infrared survey. It was not a shadow of terrain nor of craters. It was a perfect geometric shape, as if someone had carved a circle in the darkness. NASA scientists have suggested sensor failure. The Defense Department disagreed. 3 weeks later, new surveys confirmed the same shape, larger this time, as if it were changing size. The report read, "Object has anomalous thermal variation. Artificial structure is considered possible." In the margin, handwritten, someone added, "Not artificial, not human." Harris kept turning pages carefully, feeling that each line offered a piece of a larger secret. The next session described a meeting between NASA and intelligence officials. The goal, to decide whether to investigate the mysterious shape of the hidden moon. The record indicated that the operation was approved under the cover name Project Lunar Silence, Apollo 23. Unlike previous missions, the selected crew was not released to the press nor officially registered. The astronauts chosen were 3 men known for their psychological stability and total obedience to protocol: Major William Carter, Dr. Leonard Briggs, and Lieutenant Robert Halley. All their photos were crossed out. The report moved on to the preparation of the mission. Unconventional equipment was installed in the lander: deep infrared cameras, exotic radiation sensors, drilling tools, and something called the Type K containment module. No one specified what it should contain, but there was one detail written in large letters: there will be no return samples. Harris felt his throat dry as he read that. Continuing, the document included the transcripts of communication between the Apollo 23 team and Mission Control. The first few hours were trivial: telemetry, orbit checking, and attitude adjustments. But right at the entrance of the hidden face, the transmission became more tense. The recording read, "Carter, Control, we're seeing the thermal point. It's real. It's much bigger than it looked on satellites. Control, describe the structure." Carter, "It's not a structure. Seems an entrance." Briggs, "Oh my God, the edges are smooth, millimeter precision. This is not natural." Harris turned the page attentively. The description of the arrival on the surface was dry and objective. Apollo 23 touched the lunar soil just 50 meters from the object. The astronauts donned their suits and walked to the thermal circle. The next few lines were accompanied by blurred photographs. The images showed what should never exist on the moon. A metallic ring emerging from the ground, perfectly round, like the edge of a buried door. The surface reflected sunlight in a strange, almost liquid way. A comment by an engineer, written decades later, read, "That wasn't there during Apollo 16. That appeared." The transcript continued. Halley. Control. I'm touching the surface. It's hot, almost pulsing. Control did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was strained. Control. Don't touch anything else. Wait for instructions. But the next line indicated the beginning of the disaster. 5 minutes after the last broadcast, the cameras picked up movement. One of the attachments included sequential photos. The metal surface began to retract as if breathing, as if a membrane were being tensioned by something internal. Halley retreated. Briggs began to shout into the microphone. The structure opened, not like a door, but like a mechanical flower. Panels glided silently, revealing a deep, dark corridor lined with blue lights that lit up sequentially, as if warning of the arrival of visitors. The next transcript. Carter. That's a hangar. Control. That's a hangar buried on the moon. Halley. We're not alone here. The report said that after 20 minutes of debate, Control authorized entry, a decision Harris knew had been made under enormous pressure, probably political. The original mission was only reconnaissance, but in the face of the impossible, curiosity overcame prudence. Carter, Briggs, and Halley entered. After 50 meters, the recording changed tonality. Trembling voices, increasing interference. The report described what they saw. A corridor that seemed to continue for miles. Huge hexagonal structures like sections of a mothership. Cavities lined up as mooring ports. But most disturbing was the total absence of lunar dust. It was as if the place had been cleaned or used recently. One line of the report highlighted, "Ports have recent mooring marks, not human." In the final transcript before the loss of communication, Carter described something at the end of the hall. "There are bodies." No. I don't know if they are bodies, they are forms, silhouettes. They seem suspended, as if preserved. None of them are human. So, silence. The broadcast ended abruptly. The monitors blacked out. The data from Apollo 23 stopped being sent, as if the spacecraft had been turned off from within. The last recorded sentence was said by Carter in an almost inaudible voice. "I think they're coming back." The report stated that after 3 hours of non-contact, all signs of Apollo 23 disappeared. The mission was officially classified as a catastrophic communication failure. No rescue attempts were authorized. Nobody was recovered. No explanation was given. And then Harris noticed the most disturbing part of the document, hidden near the end, written in cold, objective language. Later images indicate that the structure closed again and moved slowly, as if it were sinking deeper into the lunar crust. A handwritten comment simply read, "The port has been closed. The mothership has buried itself again." Harris closed the file with trembling hands. That was not just an erased account of history. It was a buried warning. And the question that remained was the most frightening. If there was an alien port for the moon, where were the owners? The Aquila 23 lunar module touched the surface of the moon without emitting any sound, other than the slight tremor that ran through its structure. The landing took place at 03:17 UTC, at a point where no human spacecraft had landed before, Sector 41B, located in the deepest region of the dark face, where sunlight has not reached for billions of years. The astronauts' first sensation was no surprise. It was an absence of light, absence of horizon, absence of any visual reference that resembled the moon that the world knew. The front screen displayed only a gray void, interrupted by long shadows that seemed to move as the camera's focus tried to adjust. The dark face was not only dark, she was dead, static, frozen in time. as if it were an old photograph slowly abandoning its colors. Captain Daniel Reeves took a deep breath and in a firm voice reported, "Houston, this is Aquila 23. Landing confirmed. No apparent damage." There was no response for 10 seconds. Then, just static. The second astronaut, Elias Monroe, tested the communication panel. "Houston, confirm reception. Exchange. Nothing." Reeves adjusted frequencies, changed channels, and reorganized internal cables. Nothing changed. There was no interference. There was no electrical failure. It was as if the space between the moon and the Earth had been swallowed up. He looked at Elijah. "We are alone." Elijah replied with an expression that tried to hide his fear. "So we followed the protocol. Mission continues." They both knew it was a lie. The protocol said that without contact for more than 3 minutes, the mission should return immediately. But no one would risk destroying the chance to investigate what NASA had kept secret for decades. The huge heat signature detected on the dark face since 1963, a year before Apollo 23 itself was planned. Reeves pressed the button to open the hatch compartment. The metallic sound echoed inside the cabin. The door opened into total darkness. There was no glare from the sun reflecting off the lunar dust, as in the Apollo 11 transmissions. There was only pitch so dense that it felt solid. Elias activated the light on his helmet. A narrow beam made its way before them, illuminating the gray soil. The surface was not smooth. It was marked by almost imperceptible geometric patterns, as if the terrain had been shaped by some kind of three-dimensional impression. Reeves commented, "That's not natural. They are linear brands." Repeated. Elijah knelt down and ran his hand over the lunar soil. The powder reacted strangely. Part of it rose into the air as if obeying an orderly, almost magnetic movement, before resting again in perfect patterns, like small circuits. "Gravity doesn't explain that," Elias murmured. The pair walked, recording everything. Each step left a mark that disappeared seconds later, repositioning itself in its original form, as if the surface refused to register human presence. 4 minutes after the spacecraft left, the internal monitor picked up something. A weak signal. Regular. Rhythmic. Just above the thermal noise of the moon. Reeves stopped. "This is not natural. It's a stable frequency." Elias adjusted the external receiver installed on the suit's arm. The screen flashed and revealed a constant energy signature coming from 2 miles north of their position. Reeves felt his spine freeze. That's it. The signature that they tried to hide for 20 years. Elijah shook his head. "If it's true, we are facing the greatest find in history." They advanced. The lunar landscape transformed as they walked. Black mounds seemed to move with the changing angle of the lanterns. Shadows lengthened and shrank without physical logic. With each step, the air inside the helmet seemed to get heavier, although there was no atmosphere outside. When they reached the detected point, Elias stopped abruptly. "Dan, look at this." In front of them, a gigantic wall rose from the ground, as if it were part of the moon itself. A wall, perfectly, Lisa, Rita, linear. Calm edges that reflected light like polished metal, despite being buried under billions of years of lunar dust. She didn't look like stone, not even with terrestrial metal. It was something in between. Something built. Reeves approached and ran his hand over the surface. The wall reacted. Lines of blue light began to light up where his fingers touched, running fast like circuits awakening for the first time in eons. Elijah instinctively retreated. "Dan, this is active. Push it away." But the captain couldn't. The wall seemed to bind him visually, as if calling for him. With a slight tremor, the ground vibrated. The light ran down the central lines of the wall, and suddenly a door, which had not existed before, appeared, outlined by the same blue light. It opened silently, sliding upwards. Behind her was a huge corridor, lit by a greenish glow that came from nowhere. There was no discernible source of light. It was as if the interior emitted light through matter itself. Reeves took a deep breath. "We have to get in." Elias hesitated. "NASA will want it. The world will want it." Reeves interrupted. "And that's why they erased the mission from history. They crossed the threshold. As soon as they entered, the lights behind them went out. The corridor closed. The ship, the lunar surface, and all known space disappeared behind them. Ahead, a cyclopean structure stretched for miles. It was like a buried spaceport. Platforms, columns, catwalks, everything too gigantic for any human species. And everything alive." Reeves swallowed hard. "This is not a lunar construct," Elias added. "This is a hangar," Reeves corrected him. "No, it's more than that." The captain raised the light from his helmet and illuminated the ceiling. A gigantic symbol was carved there. One circulo. Come, one eye in the center. The same eye that will appear centuries later in the subterranean messages of the Earth. Elijah whispered. "Dan, we weren't the first humans to see that." Reeves replied. "No, we were the first allowed." The entire structure shook, as if waking up for the first time in millennia. Something was inside, something that has always waited for their arrival. The broadcast should not have existed. Apollo 23 officially never left the ground. It was never released. It never had a crew. He never had a mission. This was the accepted version, recorded and repeated for decades. But as the makeshift probe transmitted shaky images of the moon's dark surface, the institutional lie began to crack. The operator who captured the first sequence was paralyzed in front of the monitor. The screen showed a field of angular rocks illuminated only by the faint light of the probe itself. Nothing much at first glance. But when the focus adjusted, new shapes began to emerge in the background of the frame. Straight lines, exposed metals, structures, things that no one has ever seen on the moon. The operator zoomed in on the image and only then realized that it was not a geological formation. It was architecture, a kind of platform with worn pillars and giant plates that reflect light irregularly. He called the supervisor. In less than 15 seconds, the entire reception room was in absolute silence, staring at the impossible. The probe, limited in power, was trying to stabilize the footage. The image froze, came back, and trembled, but revealed more and more details. The supervisor pressed a button, activating the physical and redundant recording. He knew that from then on, no digital data would be reliable. The probe began to advance slowly over the surface without atmosphere. She seemed to be being pulled, not directed. Closer to the structures, closer to what did not appear on any official lunar map. The metallic color, despite being covered by ancient dust, reflected a brightness that was impossible to be natural. The probe turned the camera slightly, displaying a gigantic half-buried colonnade. A colonnade that appeared to have been part of a monumental entrance. No one breathed in the room. Everyone was compressing the truth in their own eyes. The entrance was too big, too much precision, perfect angles. Nothing was left to chance in that. There were no signs of erosion by wind or water, as on the planet, only the wear and tear of time, and even then, little. It was as if that structure was asleep, or waiting. The probe got even closer. Its light turned on automatically, reflecting off a smooth black surface. A type of panel, hexagonal in shape, with symbols that seemed engraved with technology beyond any human capacity of the time. The operator zoomed in. The symbols were long, curved and intertwined, but with repetitions. A linguistic pattern, a writing. The whole room began to enter into debate at the same time, without a voice, only with panicked looks. The supervisor, realizing that the silent hysteria would begin to erupt, ordered, "Nobody says anything. Keep watching." But the probe was going too far. It passed the colonnade into a tunnel whose geometry contradicted all known architectural models. The ceiling was so high that the probe's own light barely reached its contour. The floor was too smooth, too artificial. The probe was not supposed to go any deeper, but it kept moving forward. A technician tried to send a retreat command. No response. Another tried to cut power. Nothing. The probe was, in some way, independent, or obeying another source of command. The tunnel began to curve in a gentle descent. The transmission became more static, but still clear enough to see that there was something in the background, a bluish, oscillating light, pulsating as if it were alive. The supervisor increased the contrast of the image. Light was a form, a geometric shape, a kind of altar or nucleus. Before it could be analyzed, a movement occurred in the corner of the screen, a quick but sharp movement. Something approached the probe. The operator froze the frame, trying to understand. The figure was not human. It wasn't a machine either. It was elongated with thin, curved limbs and an almost liquid sheen. When the operator highlighted the silhouette, a chill ran down the spine of everyone in the room. The creature seemed to observe the probe, tilting its head, as if recognizing something familiar, or as if he remembered. The camera wobbled. The creature took a step. The blue light behind her pulsed harder, as if reacting to the movement. The probe began to shake. The image turned into noise. The audio exploded into violent static. The supervisor yelled to cut power, but the probe had not responded to any human commands in a long time. The creature disappeared from the frame. The camera moved on its own, pointing upwards, revealing that the tunnel roof had huge vertical structures, such as antennas, columns, or ribs. They all pulsed with the same blue color, as if they were part of an organism. The probe began to melt into the image. The metal seemed to heat up as the high-pitched sound filled the transmission. The operator covered his ears, but it was no use. Sound was not just sound. It was a direct vibration in thought. The screen went dark. For a second, everyone thought the probe had been destroyed, but the image came back. And now it showed something completely different. A circular room filled with floating hexagonal structures, as if pieces of anti-gravity technology were reconstituting themselves. In the center of the room, a pedestal, and on the pedestal, an inscription that neither of them knew, but that everyone understood in some ancestral way, as if it were part of all the languages on Earth. The inscription read, "We will be back." The probe exploded in light. The screen went out for good. No one in the room spoke. There were no more questions, because Apollo 23 was not a failed mission. It was a buried warning, a warning that has finally been found. The corridor seemed endless. There were no echoes, there was no wind, and there was no dust. The only thing that existed there was a silence so absolute that it seemed to absorb the sounds produced by the astronauts' own footsteps. The place was not made of stone, nor of conventional metal. The ground was a smooth, almost polished surface, cold as ice and at the same time vibrant, as if pulsating with internal energy. Captain Daniel Reeves walked in front, lighting the way with the flashlight attached to his helmet. Light was swallowed up by the walls, which reflected just enough to reveal their shapes. Behind him, Elias Monroe advanced slowly, recording everything on video. But Reeves realized that Monroe was shaking. His movements were light but steady. "Elijah, breathe. We're fine." "I know we are," Monroe replied, her voice trembling. "It's just this place. Dan, this is not an installation. Seems an organism." Reeves wanted to disagree. He wanted to believe that they were inside something built by an advanced civilization, yes, but still something inert, understandable, and dead. But the more they walked, the harder it became to deny the feeling that they were not inside a structure, but inside something that reacted to their presence. Something he might have dreamed of. Something that perhaps was just awakening. They continued in silence for almost 10 minutes until they reached the first royal opening. A circular hall opened before them, with gigantic columns connecting the floor to the ceiling, each with hexagonal patterns and lines of blue light running like veins. In the center, there was an emptiness, a deep circular slit that descended as far as the light could not reach. Reeves approached the edge, leaning cautiously. "Monroe, that seems a gravity well," Monroe added, "but the reading says that there's not enough mass for this to be pulling anything." The well was still, but the air inside it seemed to breathe. Small glowing particles floated inside the slit, moving from bottom to top as if following some kind of current. It was beautiful. It's absolutely terrifying. Monroe adjusted the sensors. Dan, this is not light. They are objects, micro-machines, treading fixed routes. Micro-machines? Yes, like nanostructures but organic, non-metallic. Reeves took a step back. What the hell is this place? Monroe looked around, looking for anything that suggested functional architecture. And then he did. At the opposite end of the hall was an open portal. Not a human portal, but a gigantic arch with smooth edges and a thickness that is impossible to determine. It emitted its own light, a soft, steady glow that didn't flicker. They walked there. On the other side of the portal was another corridor, but different from the first. It had absurd proportions. The ceiling must have been about 40 meters high, and the walls were curved, as if they were inside a gigantic tunnel. Every 50 meters, cylindrical structures lined up with the wall, such as berths, docks, and places for mooring. Reeves muttered, "This right here, this is not a corridor." "I know," Monroe replied. "It's a hangar, but a hangar made for ships much larger than anything human. Ships that may never have used combustion. Ships may be alive." The ground had marks, deep grooves that repeated themselves, parallel, as if something gigantic had slid there. They were not natural marks. They were not erosions. They were trails. Monroe positioned the camera and began to walk slowly. But as he passed near one of the docks, the wall next to him flashed for a moment. Lines of light ran across the surface, forming complex symbols that pulsed as if they were breathing. The light then disappeared. Reeves ran to him. "Elijah, did you see it?" "I didn't do anything," Monroe replied. She reacted on her own. The symbol that the panels formed was circular, with 3 twisted lines coming out of its center. It was the same symbol detected in old photos of deep craters. The same symbol is found in ancient underground sites on Earth. The same symbol was picked up by the sensors on the far side for almost 20 years. It was no coincidence. It was a signature, the signature of the person who built it. Suddenly, the whole room shook. A deep rumble, like underground thunder, echoed throughout the structure. Reeves looked back immediately, ready to run. But the shaking ceased as quickly as it began. And then they listened. It was not a voice. It wasn't sound. It was a vibrating, low-frequency noise coming from the deepest docks. It was slow and rhythmic, like a very old breath. Monroe approached, recording everything with the camera. The sound grew louder as they approached a specific dock. The dock light turned on by itself, and inside, something was stored. It was a huge cylindrical capsule, translucent as black crystal. Inside, silhouettes, lots of silhouettes. High, elongated, with thin limbs curved like those of the creature that the probe had captured minutes before it was destroyed. Monroe's heart raced. "Dan, they're here," Reeves replied in a trembling voice. "No, they were here." The creatures were motionless, like statues, but there was a problem. There was no dust on them. There were no signs of millennia of rest. They were recent, very recent. The tremor returned, stronger this time. The walls vibrated, the light flickered, and at the bottom of the dock, the silhouettes moved. They did not open their eyes. They didn't get up. They did not walk. The vibration simply activated some internal mechanism, and the capsule began to open. Reeves grabbed Monroe by the arm. "Runs, now." The two of them ran down the colossal hallway as the light behind them burst into blue sparks. The noise of activation spread out like a wave, awakening dock after dock, lighting up symbols on the walls, and reactivating structures that shouldn't be alive. They only stopped when the ground shook so hard that they almost lost their balance. And then, at the beginning of the hallway, a shadow emerged. The same silhouette was seen by the probe. Now high. Now it wakes up. Now looking directly at them, Reeves retreated, breathless. "My God, it was not a ruin," Monroe added. It's an operational base. The form took a step, and the lights in the entire hallway came on all at once. Apollo 23 had not found a temple, not a tomb, not even an abandoned ship. They had found an active harbor, and someone, or something, was coming home. The silence of the forced module was not normal. It wasn't the kind of silence that accompanies electrical failures, communication breakdowns, or momentary power outages. It was absolute silence, as if the whole structure was listening. This is how astronaut Robert Keller described it in the final part of his diary, recovered decades later. Before sending back that last recording, Keller was the only crew member who remained fully conscious as Apollo 23 explored the subsurface of the dark part of the moon. The internal pressure had begun to fluctuate. Small cracks appeared in the panel. Emergency lights flashed with a frequency that resembled a heartbeat. None of this made sense. They were on lunar soil, isolated, without atmospheric interference, without magnetism capable of producing such distortion. The only explanation was also the most terrible. Something below them was active. The metallic smell inside the helmet only increased. Keller advanced through the narrow corridor lit by red LEDs, listening for the slow drag of something on the walls. The sound echoed as if the module were bigger inside than it really was. He knew that this was not possible, but the feeling was real. His accelerated breathing made his visor fog up. He wiped with a trembling hand as he tried to maintain some level of rationality. When he reached the main compartment, he saw his two motionless colleagues standing facing the open hatch that led to the lunar exterior. They did not react to his call. They didn't blink. The monitors showed that both were alive, but in a state of neurological paralysis. The hatch, open from the inside out, had not been forced. That was not possible. The depressurization should have killed everyone there, but it didn't. The structure seemed to interfere with physics, bending rules that no NASA manual ever predicted. Keller touched the shoulder of Daniels, the engineer on board. Daniels turned his face slowly, as if moved by invisible puppets. His gaze was fixed, dilated, and empty. His lips parted slightly, and a sentence came out in a whisper that didn't seem human. He woke up. Keller instinctively retreated. Daniels didn't speak with his voice. It sounded like the voice of someone much older, someone who had no lungs, no vocal cords, but who spoke through the metal structure attached to the lunar subsoil. The astronaut looked at Collins, the pilot. She also repeated, "He woke up." At that moment, the ground beneath them vibrated. Not an ordinary vibration, but a movement that seemed to respond to words, as if the moon itself were waking up along with whatever was asleep there. Keller ran to the control panel and tried to close the hatch manually. Nothing worked. The feeling of being watched intensified. He looked outside. The darkness of the crater stretched out like a solid sea, but there was something there. Something emerged, very slowly. A pillar. A metallic monolith that did not exist on any lunar chart. His surface pulsed with a bluish inner light, as if he were breathing. With each pulse, the module responded with metallic cracks, similar to the sound of tectonic plates moving. Keller realized he couldn't let that happen. He grabbed Daniels and Collins by the arms, dragging them to the core of the module. They resisted with slow movements, as if they had lost part of their autonomy over their own bodies. Their clothes trembled. Alarm bells screamed. The automatic transmission turned on by itself, sending signals to Houston that should never have left. The monolith kept emerging. A gigantic structure, hidden for millennia, awakened for the first time before human eyes. Keller heard the voice again. This time, not coming from anyone specific. It came from every surface, from every vibration, from every cubic inch of air. You shouldn't have seen it. He tried to isolate the module, activate the engines, or do anything to get away from the crater, but the module did not respond. It was as if he were imprisoned, as if invisible hands held the hoof, preventing movement. The monolith projected a series of symbols into the air, symbols identical to those found on prehistoric artifacts on Earth. symbols that hundreds of archaeologists have tried to decipher without success. Then, for the first time, Keller understood. It was no coincidence. Earth had been visited before. Much earlier. The moon was not just a natural satellite. It was a warehouse, a port, a lighthouse buried under millennial dust. A piercing noise pierced through the helmets, a sound capable of tearing sanity. Daniels fell. Collins convulsed. Keller struggled to remain conscious. His eyes watered, his vision blurred. But before he blacked out, he saw something reflected in the visor, a humanoid form silhouetted against the monolith, tall, slender, and composed of liquid light. He did not walk, glided, and he approached them. The final voice he heard did not come from any colleagues. It didn't come from the radio. It didn't come from the structure. It came from within him. First issue completed. The next one starts when you wake up. And then everything went white. NASA classified the mission. He deleted all official recordings. He told the audience that Apollo 23 never existed. But it existed. And the fragments of Keller's diary, recovered years later, revealed another sentence written in his handwriting, shaky and dirty with moon dust. He didn't wake up. It awakens others. Keller died without being able to explain what he saw, but he left a warning. What is under the hidden face does not belong to this system. It does not belong to time, and it should never be woken up. The file designated as Apollo 23 Black Deck Final should never have existed. It was not in reports, there were no reference numbers, and there were no official signatures. It was an orphaned record, dated only with a handwritten phrase at the top of the first page, last recording. And yet, the document was there, forgotten at the bottom of the armored drawer of room Z14, among records that would never come to light. When analyst Mitchell first opened the file, decades after the incident, he felt he was entering a grave that no one wanted to be reopened. The recording began with hisses, as if the tape were being played on a much older piece of equipment than it should have been using. After a few seconds, a heavy breath came up, accompanied by muffled noises. Commander Hayes's voice first emerged, but not as in NASA reports. It was an irregular voice affected by tremors, distinctly deteriorated by panic. He tried to maintain the firm tone of a trained astronaut, but desperation gnawed at him from within. "If this recording survives," Hayes said, after a few seconds of silence, "if anyone hears that, so it means they couldn't erase everything." Mitchell advanced the tape. The voice continued, "We are about to leave the surface, but nothing here is what it should be." Another long silence, as if the commander was fighting his own mind. "What we saw, what we found, this mission should never have happened." The ribbon shook. Sounds of scratched metal appeared in the background. Hayes took a deep breath. Then he continued, "When we descended into the dark space, we didn't expect to find structures." Mitchell paused there. He retreated 2 seconds. He repeated the phrase. Each syllable was loaded with meanings that did not belong to the mission of a spaceship. Hayes continued, "They are not ruins. They are not natural formations. And they are not inactive." The voice slowed down, becoming almost a whisper. "They were waiting." There was a crash. Something or someone hit the ship's hull. Hayes held his breath. You could hear his heart racing through the microphone attached to his suit. "We are not alone here," he said. "We never were." Mitchell moved forward a few more seconds. The tape cut to another part of the recording, probably from the inside of the capsule. There were sounds of keys being pressed and alerts ringing. Hayes was trying to start some sort of emergency sequence. But there was another voice in the background. Weak, distorted, but undeniably human. It was Lewis's voice, the missing pilot, the man whose body was never found. Hayes seemed unable to believe his ears. "Lewis?" he asked. The tape picked up an almost inaudible response. "We shouldn't have come." Mitchell pressed his headphones to his ears. He needed to hear better. The phrase was repeated, clearer this time. It was really Lewis. But something in his voice was wrong, as if he was far. Not physically, but mentally. "Hayes, They're waking up. The commander began to tremble. Lewis, where are you? Answer. Where you? The answer came with devastating slowness. Down here. Mitchell instantly retracted the recording. I wanted to be sure. The phrase was exactly down here. Hayes seemed to almost collapse. What is your position? Are you injured? Lewis, answer. But it soon became clear that there was no more talk. Whatever was using Lewis's voice, he was not talking to Hayes. I was talking to Hayes. The tape changed to cut snippets. There were metallic noises, as if something huge was scratching the outer structure of the ship. Hayes shouted instructions to the other crew. But there was no more team. There was no more crew. There was no one else to answer. The voice came back, stronger, almost crystal clear. You saw what you could not see. Mitchell felt his spine freeze. Hayes shouted, Who's talking? What do you want? After a few seconds, the answer came, accompanied by a sound similar to that of doors opening, but doors that scratched the space itself. You were not invited. From there, the audio deteriorated. It was difficult to distinguish noises from the interior of the spacecraft and noises coming from the lunar environment. There were fragments of phrases, emergency commands, and knocks on the hull, the sound of air escaping, impact sounds, and then complete silence. But the archive was not finished. After 30 seconds of no audio, something returned. A voice, but not Hayes's, nor was it Lewis's. It was deeper, more resonant, a voice that seemed to cross not only microphones but also bones. This place is not for you. Mitchell paused. He felt his chest tighten. The voice continued. You are too young, too fragile. They talk too loudly. Then, almost like a lament, we built the port. You walked on it as blind. Then she changed her tune, not in aggression, but in warning. Go back to the lights of your little sky. Do not return to the hidden side. The tape was coming to an end. Mitchell moved forward a few seconds. The last sentence, spoken with perfect human diction, was recorded so clearly that it seemed to have been pronounced close to the ear. If they come back, we will all wake up. The audio ended there. But not completely. The last split second picked up something, a sound Mitchell couldn't identify. Something that didn't sound mechanical or organic. Something that seemed to be moving inside the walls. He took off his headphones, pale. The room was empty and silent. But Mitchell knew with absolute certainty that the recording should never have resurfaced. And now that he had heard, there was no turning back. The discovery of Apollo 23 was not just a mistake. It was a warning, and they were just beginning to wake up. The rescue capsule rose in absolute silence, a silence so deep that it seemed to swallow even the sound of its own breathing. Commander Harris was seated in the front seat, but his eyes were fixed on the void. His face still reflected the brightness of what they had seen down there, in that structure buried against all the laws of lunar geology. Anderson looked at the capsule panel but saw no numbers or graphs. I saw flashes, echoes, and involuntary memories of that gigantic buried port, as if each neuron tried to resist the erasure of the impossible. The ascent engine burned with constant force, pushing the capsule away from the lunar soil. The vibration that rose through the hull was so soft that it sounded like a whisper. But the silence inside the ship was different. It was dense, almost physical. Is everything okay back there, sir? Asked the capsule pilot, Turner. No one answered. Harris was still remembered in detail. The corridor was illuminated by lights that turned on by themselves. The symbols are identical to the Sumerian, Greek, and Latin markings, all mixed together as if humanity had copied fragments of a much older language. And at the end of the corridor, the hangar, a colossal space, which should not fit on the moon, let alone exist under its surface. A port of ships, not human. Ships that seemed asleep but alive, as if they were waiting for something, or someone. And there was that feeling, that presence, something that watched them through the shadows, something that seemed to measure their every step, something that managed to move without generating sound in the airless environment. It looked like an ancient predator, but intelligent, patient, and almost curious. The capsule continued to rise. Turner looked back, finally noticing their blank expressions. He tried a joke to break the mood, but the voice failed. Commander Harris was holding something to his chest, a metallic object that he had brought hidden from the underground structure. Anderson had seen when he caught it but didn't have the courage to stop it. It was a small hexagonal piece made of a metal that looked like solidified liquid. He knew that it should not have been brought. None of that structure should have been touched, but it was too late. When the capsule finally left low orbit and began the automatic course towards the main module, something happened. Turner's dashboard flashed once, then two, and then all the lights in the cockpit went out, replaced by a blue-violet glow so intense that it seemed to come from inside the ship. The object in Harris's hands began to vibrate. Anderson instinctively retreated. "Harris, what is it?" Harris did not respond. He was paralyzed. Eyes are too open. The object began to emit very subtle noises, such as incomplete syllables trying to form human words. The capsule screens lit up, but not with flight data, not with telemetry, not with NASA codes, with symbols. The same symbols are engraved on the walls of the lunar structure. Turner tried to restart the system, but the panel would not respond. The ship was getting unstable. The rotation increased. The capsule vibrated as if something was trying to penetrate through the hull. The air became heavy, as if the cabin was filled with static electricity. Anderson held his seat tightly. "Harris, drop that." "Harris, damn it, drop it now." But the commander couldn't. His fingers were locked, as if the metal had fused to his hands. The object pulsed more intensely, and more symbols began to appear, now projected on the walls of the capsule, like improvised holograms. Turner screamed in the front seat. "We're losing control. I can't stabilize. The system does not respond. Something is accessing the controls." Suddenly, everything stopped. The noise, the rotation, the lights, the object. Absolute silence. Turner breathed too fast. Anderson too. Only Harris remained motionless, staring at something that only he saw. Then a voice spread across the cabin. A non-human voice, but understandable. "You have opened a path." The cabin lights flashed. The moon disappeared from the windows. The capsule no longer seemed to be moving. It didn't look anywhere. It was as if the space around it had been replaced by a liquid darkness. You touched what wasn't ready to be seen. The voice came from all sides, from inside their minds, from the hull of metal. "Everything. You have found the house of the ancient travelers." Anderson tried to speak, but no sound came out. "They didn't leave," said the voice. "They wait." The holograms rearranged. They formed a star map, a map that did not correspond to anything known. Entire systems, nebulous routes that went far beyond human limits. And in the center of the map, the Earth, surrounded by symbols that Anderson did not recognize but that conveyed a single message: marking, label, position. The Earth was a catalog point, not a home, a record. The entire capsule shook as if it was being pulled elsewhere. Turner tried to activate the manual emergency system. Failed. The panel burned. The blue light intensified until it almost blinded everyone there. Harris finally managed to whisper, "We shouldn't have gone in there." The voice answered, "You didn't go in. They were invited." The light exploded, and then everything went out. The main module of the Apollo 23 mission received a telemetry alert at 07:49 a.m. The descent capsule had disappeared from radar for exactly 4 seconds. When it reappeared, it was on a perfect trajectory, as if nothing had happened. Turner drove normally. Commander Harris and Anderson seemed calm, too calm. The capsule landed in the ocean without incident. The three left with calm smiles, saying that they had lost contact only for a few moments. No anomalies, no problem, no memory of what they had seen. They looked perfect, too perfect. The hexagonal object was never found, and during quarantine as they slept, Surveillance cameras picked up 3 voices simultaneously whispering the same phrase in a language that no one could translate. NASA has closed the investigation, and the Apollo 23 file was buried the same night, under the same classification as all the other mysteries that the government prefers never to explain.